on the cultural impact of Mr. Krabs Eats Arby's and fucking dies. The video of Mr. Krabs Eats Arby's is a cultural cornerstone of our society, on par with Shakespeare or the Holy Bible. But many people don't fully understand why it's such a foundational pillar. Well, allow me to go step by step and explain this. The video begins with Mr. Krabs delighted by the sight of Arby's, before swimming in it. This obviously represents the everyday man's desire for Arby's. But did you ever notice what Mr. Krabs was swimming in and eating? This signifies how Arby's is actually really disgusting, as they have literally zero quality control for whatever they put in their food. This is compounded by Mr. Krabs claiming that Arby's gets a bad rep. Perhaps Arby's has a bad rep for a reason. Maybe there's a good reason that people would rather go to Taco Bell, which has a near 100% guarantee of giving people explosive diarrhea, as opposed to being within a mile radius of an Arby's. Mr. Krabs, upon consuming the Arby's, realizes that the Arby's speaks to him, once again showing Arby's' horrendous lack of quality control. But this is where the true cultural impact of this begins. For you see, if this was just about how Arby's tastes bad, no one would care. We all know that. However, the important portion is highlighted in that this is the underclass's cry for help from Arby's wage slaving, and wage slaving as a whole. As we all know, Arby's puts employees in its food from time to time. This undead worker is crying for help, not only from being eaten, but from being an Arby's employee and, indeed, being a slave to the system, from having to work a 9-to-5 job for decades before an untimely death caused by stress from working for this very system. Mr. Krabs then begins convulsing and screaming that his heart stopped. While one would initially believe that this is because the Arby's instantly clogged Mr. Krabs' arteries and caused his heart to stop, this is more so a side effect of the stresses put on a boss such as Mr. Krabs. For years, Krabs has been trying to keep the Krabby Patty secret formula away from plankton, and it must become tiring. But more than that, he has to pay taxes. Mr. Krabs likely feels physical pain every single time he has to spend money, and so this final act of spending money to eat at Arby's finally did him in, especially upon realizing that Arby's tastes like shit. Mr. Krabs' final request is that Squidward doesn't eat at Arby's. However, Squidward does not heed Mr. Krabs' warning. This is representative of the younger and more inexperienced sometimes not listening to the older generation's advice. Sometimes this is a genuine and practical line of thinking. For example, you can no longer go into a store, find the manager, and give him a firm handshake because it isn't the 70s anymore, you fucking boomers. Nor can you buy a house at 25 or simply work your way up to it in 99% of cases anymore. This speaks to how boomers have ruined society by being a bunch of morons who couldn't think to the future, nor could they give a damn about their children or grandchildren outside of living out the things they didn't get to do in their childhood. Which is why many boomers want their kids or grandkids to be sports stars because they never could, or they want to relive their glory days through them. In this case, while Squidward seemingly had a decent idea for ignoring Mr. Krabs, this backfires, as upon eating a small bite of Arby's, he instantly dies. Squidward's death could also represent the death of the working class, as it isn't given nearly as much fanfare as Mr. Krabs' death, and Squidward could be seen as easily replaced by the majority of society. After all, even Squidward once admitted that nobody cares about the fate of labor so long as they can get their instant gratification. Finally, there's Patrick. Patrick, having no doubt seen the previous two cases, thinks it's safe to eat Arby's, eating the entire sandwich whole. This is a reference to the biblical concept of gluttony, which is eating simply for the sake of eating. Patrick dies 12 seconds later, with his final words being, "Damn, that shit tasted terrible." This, unlike much of the rest of this groundbreaking film, is rather typical, as Patrick is simply stating an objective fact here. Seriously, who goes to eat at Arby's if you have literally any other option available? Like, no joke here, does anyone here go to eat at Arby's and actually enjoy it? If you find someone telling you that they like Arby's, they're clearly lying. As the final act of this video, Mr. Krabs has somehow revived himself, thus bringing up the Deus Ex Machina trope, or the God of the Machine. Mr. Krabs was revived to tell SpongeBob something very important, and that is to never eat at Arby's, before yelling that he's fucking dying. For once, it seems that someone actually took Mr. Krabs' advice, as we never see SpongeBob eat at Arby's. At the end of the video, Mr. Krabs seems to have made a full recovery, before the doctor looks at his patient chart only to begin screaming and demanding he not be touched. This actually has nothing to do with Arby's, it just so happens that the medical bill was so high that it even caused the doctor to panic. Because Mr. Krabs lives in a country where if you don't have health insurance, you should probably just die. To conclude, Mr. Krabs Eats Arby's is a wonderful piece of art showing some of the major flaws in our society. The only thing I would have added might have been how gamers are an oppressed group and that we live in a society. On a final note, don't eat at Arby's. You'll probably die or something.